Good morning, children. Welcome back to our Google Classroom. Today, we will discuss the topic active and passive voice. The voice of the verb describes its relationship with the subject, object, or the other elements in a sentence. The voice of the verb can be either active or passive. The voice of the verb tells us whether the subject is the doer of the action or it is the receiver of the action's effect. It tells us whether the subject is the doer of the action or it is the receiver of the action's effect. How can we identify that? Let me explain this through some examples. First one, Rahul ate an apple. Rahul ate an apple. An apple was eaten by Rahul. An apple was eaten by Rahul. Is there any difference in the meaning of these two sentences? No. The meaning as well as the tense of these two sentences are the same. There is no difference. Then what is the difference? In the first sentence, Rahul ate an apple. The subject Rahul is the doer of the action. The focus is on the subject, the doer of the action. What is the action done by Rahul? He ate an apple. So we give importance to the subject or the doer of the action. The subject Rahul is the doer of the action. So it is said to be in the active voice. A verb is in the active voice when its form shows that the subject is the doer of the action. So the first sentence, Rahul ate an apple, is the active voice. Second sentence, an apple was eaten by Rahul. Here the focus is not on the doer of the action. Here the subject is an apple and it is the receiver of the action's effect. Actually the action was done by Rahul. The subject here in the second sentence, the subject is an apple. It is the receiver of the action's effect. The doer of the action is passive, not active. So such type of sentences are known as passive voice. A verb is said to be in the passive voice when the subject is the receiver of the action's effect. So the second sentence is the passive voice. Another example, Meera is watering the plants. Meera is watering the plants. The plants are being watered by Meera. The plants are being watered by Meera. What is the difference between these two sentences? In the first sentence, the subject Meera is the doer of the action. She is active in that sentence and it is said to be in the active voice. The second sentence, the plants are being watered by Meera. Here the subject is the plants and it is the receiver of the action done by Meera. So it is said to be in the passive voice. Hope you understood. So what is the difference between active and passive voice? A sentence is said to be in the active voice when the subject is the doer of the action, and a sentence is said to be in the passive voice when the subject is the receiver of the action's effect. Let's take the structure or the pattern of active and passive voice. The pattern of active voice is subject plus verb plus object. Subject means the doer of the action, then verb plus object. Object, that means the receiver of the action. For example, in the sentence Rahul ate an apple, Rahul is the subject and ate is the verb and an apple is the object or receiver of the action. So SVO pattern. So that is, it is very simple. Subject plus verb plus object is the pattern of active voice. And what is the form or what is the pattern of passive voice? The pattern of passive voice is subject plus any form of be. Which are the forms of be? Is, am, are, was or were. So we have to use any of the form of be according to the tense as well as the subject. With the singular subjects we can use is or was, and with the plural subjects we can use are or were. Then subject plus any form of be plus third form or V3 or the past participle form of the verb. Subject plus any form of be plus third form of the verb plus object. So in the sentence, an apple was eaten by Rahul. An apple was eaten by Rahul. An apple is the subject. Then was is the form of be. Eaten is the V3. Plus we have to add one more word by. By agent. By the action done by whom? So the action done by Rahul. So subject plus any form of be plus V3 plus by plus the object. So an apple was eaten by Rahul. An apple was eaten by Rahul. Comparing to the passive voice, the active voice has a direct, clear and strong tone, and it is very simple. While changing the passive voice into active or the active voice into passive, the meaning as well as the tense of the sentence will not change. How can we change passive voice into active or active voice into passive? The important point is, we can change a verb in the active voice into passive if the verb has an object. That means if the verb has no object, we cannot change an active voice into passive. For example, I often read on Sunday afternoons. I often read on Sunday afternoons. Here, subject and verb is there. Which is the subject? I. And which is the verb? Read. So, there is no object. So, we cannot change this voice into passive. Let's check which are the changes that we have to make while we change an active voice into passive. First one, the object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. The object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. Second one, use the appropriate form of be according to the tense and the subject. Which are the forms of be? Is, am, are, was and were. If the tense is present tense, we have to use is, am or are. If the subject is singular, we have to use is, and if the subject is plural, we have to use are. And if the subject is I, we have to use am. Then, if the tense is past tense, we have to use was with singular subject and were with plural subject. Third one, use the third form of the main verb, V3 of the main verb. First one, the object of the active voice becomes the subject of the passive voice. Second one, use the appropriate form of be. And third one, use the third form of the main verb. Let me explain this through some examples. First one, birds build nests. Birds build nests. Second one, the teacher taught the students. The teacher taught the students. First sentence is in the present tense, simple present tense. Subject plus V1 is used, so it is simple present tense. Second sentence, subject plus V2 is used, so it is simple past tense. Let's check how we can change these active voice into passive. So, according to the first rule, what we have to change? We have to change the object of the active voice into the subject of the passive voice. So, what is the object of the first sentence? Nest. So, make that object to the subject of the passive voice. So, start the sentence with nest. Nest. Then, which tense is used there? It is simple present. So, we have to use is or am or are according to the subject. The subject is plural here, so we have to use are. So, nests are. Then, build. What is the third form of build? It is built. Nests are built. Then the word by. By whom? Birds. So, nests are built by birds. That is the passive voice of the active voice. Birds build nests. What is the passive voice? Nests are built by birds. Second sentence. The teacher taught the students. What is the object here? The students. So we have to make that object into subject of the passive voice. We have to start the sentence with the students. The students. It is plural and it is in the simple past. So we have to use were. The students were. Then the third form of the verb. It is taught. The students were taught by the teacher. The students were taught by the teacher. That is the passive voice of this sentence. Let's take some more examples to understand the changes. Study this table to understand forms of active voice and passive voice in tenses. First tense, simple present. Active voice. Pratima writes a letter. Passive voice. A letter is written by Pratima. Present continuous. Active. Pratima is writing a letter. Passive. A letter is being written by Pratima. With the continuous tense, we have to use the word being. Present perfect. Active. Pratima has written a letter. Passive. A letter has been written by Pratima. So with the perfect tenses, we have to use the word been. Then simple past. Active. Pratima wrote a letter. Passive. A letter was written by Pratima. Past continuous. Active. Pratima was writing a letter. Passive. A letter was being written by Pratima. Past perfect. Active. Pratima had written a letter. Passive. A letter had been written by Pratima. Simple future with will. Active. Pratima will write a letter. Passive. A letter will be written by Pratima. Simple future with the word going to. Active. Pratima is going to write a letter. Passive. A letter is going to be written by Pratima. Future perfect. Active. Pratima will have written a letter. Passive. A letter will have been written by Pratima. Then, how we can change a passive voice into active? It's very simple. We have already learned how we can change an active voice into passive. So, the object of the passive voice becomes the subject of the active voice, and the subject of the passive voice becomes the object of the active voice. That is the first change we have to make. The subject of the passive voice becomes the object of the active voice, and the object of the passive voice becomes the subject of the active voice. Use the verb according to the tense. Then avoid the word by. These are the important steps we have to make while we change a passive voice into active. That's all for today. A YouTube URL is attached. Watch the video. A test paper is included. Submit your answers as soon as possible. We can meet in the next class with a new topic. Thank you.